Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Faryal from Scrumptious Cakes by Fairy, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this 3D rocket cake. If you want to learn how to make that, then please keep on watching. So to make the structure of the cake, you need a drill machine, and you also need this attachment which makes the hole into the board, and this is in the number 16. And the next thing you need is the MDF board. In UK, Cake Craft Company do these boards for cakes, and they are MDF boards, like super strong, about 10 mm thickness. They are just perfect for my gravity defying cakes. And then you need a regular drum board, because this is gonna go underneath this one. For my cake, I need a 5-inch size board, so I'm using this 5-inch cake drum. This is the 14-inch board, and this is the 12-inch board. The next thing you need are these threaded rods. Number of this rod is M12, and the size is 300 mm. Okay, you also need some washers. Get the thicker washers, okay, which has got more space around. You need about 4 of these, and these are M12 as well. And then you also need the nuts, these nuts, and they are M12 as well. One of the washer, I'm gonna use smaller one, which is the not the hole smaller, but the size smaller. The reason of that, because it's gonna be on the top of the board, so I don't want it to be too big. So my board is 14-inch size, so I'm gonna find the center of the board, that is going to be 7-inch. So I have drilled the holes in all of the boards. So first I'm going to attach one of the nut at the end. We are going to take one of the washers, the thick ones, and then do this. Now we are going to take another washer and then another nut, because I'm going to tighten up both of the nuts from the bottom and the top. So I have glued the board at the bottom with the hot glue gun. I'm going to take the nut again and put it through the threaded rod. I'm going to put through the washer, then the small cake drum. Now on this part you could use the same washer, but I'm going to use the one with the smaller sides. So put the nut through. Once both the nuts from the top and bottom are tightened, I'm going to cover the metal part from the tin foil, because the metal is not food safe and shouldn't go in direct contact with the food. I'm putting a long and strong poly dowel on the top of the rod, and then the bottom rod I'm covering with the foil. And I'm going to cover this whole board with the ganache, so my cake sponge sticks well to the board. Add a layer of buttercream on the top of the sponge, and then add the next layer of the sponge. Repeat this process until you reach the last layer of the cake. I started with 2 6-inch sponges, and then added 3 8-inch sponges, then 3 7-inch sponges, and then in the last I added 1 5-inch sponge on the top. Once the buttercream is done, we have to refrigerate this cake until the buttercream in the middle of the sponges are solid, because we are going to be carving. So once the cake is solid, we're gonna start carving, and you have to start slowly. You have to cut little by little. Do not take big chunks, because you don't want to regret later. Start the carving from the top. Use a bread knife and keep it at an angle, and start cutting off your cake. Take small bits at a time. This is my best advice for you. I know carving the cake can be very intimidating, but if you take small chunks at a time, you will see the progress. Once you're happy with the top, your top needs to look not exactly like cone, but kind of like cone. Then you have to go down and smooth out all of the sponges, and keep carving until you are completely happy with its shape. Now I'm going to ganache the cake. I'm using white chocolate ganache. You can find the recipe on my channel. I will leave the link of the white chocolate ganache in the description down below. Just apply a thin coat of ganache. It will hold in all of the cake crumbs. Just apply a thin coat roughly, it doesn't have to be perfect. And once it's done, you have to keep the cake in the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes. So after 15 minutes, the first layer of ganache was set hard, and then I started applying the second layer of ganache. The second layer of ganache is going to be a very thick coat, so just keep applying the ganache all over the cake very roughly with the palette knife. I'm going to use this flexi acetate smoother to smooth out the ganache on this cake. Bend the smoother in your hand a little bit so it forms a curve, and that curve will help you go around the cake nicely and smooth out the ganache. Keep working until the ganache is really smooth. Smooth out the top and keep the cake in the fridge for another 10 to 15 minutes until the ganache is set. Ganache is set, apply some water onto the cake. This will help the fondant to stick to the cake. Roll out a long piece of red fondant. Carefully lift the fondant and apply it to the cake. The fondant needs to be big enough to cover half of the cake. We are going to be doing a paneling method, so I am going to cover the other half with another piece of fondant. Cut off any excess you have and then apply the second half of the fondant and just keep smoothing all of the pleats and creases. I'm using a long ruler to mark a straight line over the joint on the side of the cake, using an X-Acto knife to cut off the excess, and I'm using that mark as a guide. Remove the excess fondant from the top layer, and then I'm going to fold the top layer of the fondant and cut off the excess fondant from the bottom layer. Do the same on the other side and cut a 1-inch wide stripe on both sides. Now add the 1-inch wide grey fondant stripe in that gap. Roll out a thick layer of black fondant and use a circle cutter to cut off 4 circles. Use the same circle cutter and create 2 marks on both sides of the cake. Apply water at the back of the black circle and then stick the fondant over that mark. Roll out a thick layer of grey fondant. Use these 2 cutters to cut off the rings for the side of the black round circles. So one size is the same size cutter and the next size is bigger than the small size. You can see I cut off about 4 circles. These are the frames of those windows. With the same grey fondant, make a cone. That cone is going to go on the top of the rocket. Apply water around the black circle and carefully add the frame rings. I am adding the cone at the top of the rocket. Cut a thin long stripe and some tiny circles from that grey fondant. Apply some glue over the joint of the cone and then attach the stripe to hide the seam. Stick the tiny circles over that 1-inch wide grey stripe. Use a small round piping tip to form the circles around the window frame. Take a 5-inch round and 1-inch deep styrofoam dummy and cut a slit so you can slide it through that threaded rod. Now cover that dummy with the black fondant. Apply some water and that will help the fondant to stick to the dummy. Cut off the excess. Use a strong non-edible glue to stick this dummy underneath the rocket and make sure it's stuck well. Roll out 1 cm thick grey fondant and then cut some rectangular blocks. Apply the edible glue and attach the bricks to the black cake dummy, and to make sure that they don't fall, insert a toothpick. Cut out the oval shape from grey fondant. We are going to use these oval pieces to hide the mark of the toothpicks, and this is how it should look. Take a piece of card. Here I'm using a cake card and I'm cutting out 2 diamond shapes. These diamond shapes are going to be the wings of the rocket, and I'm going to use these card as a guide to cut out the fondant pieces. Here I'm rolling out grey modeling paste. If you don't have modeling paste, please use the Tylo powder into the fondant so it can set hard. Once the diamond shapes are cut, put them aside. I'm using these kebab skewers, applying some glue, and I'm going to gently push them into the diamond shapes. Preheat your oven at 50 degrees Celsius and bake these for about 20 minutes. Once they are baked, let them cool down completely before you start attaching it to the cake. I'm using the silver luster to add the shading to the black windows of the rocket. Take the same silver luster powder and mix it with either rejuvenator or lemon extract to make a paint and paint over all the silver parts of the cake. I'm going to add these mini twist LED lights underneath the rocket because this is going to give a really nice effect. I'm going to use the candy floss to make the effect of smoke underneath the rocket. Candy floss starts deflating within an hour, so if you are going to keep your cake for a longer period, I would say replace the candy floss from cotton. You can use real cotton instead of candy floss. Spread the ganache over the board so the cotton candy can stick to the board. I'm just opening up the cotton candy and just covering the board at this point. Just cover the rod and the board. And once the board is covered properly, in the end, I'm going to take a very big piece of cotton candy and make a ring around the rocket so it makes the effect of like, it's just pushing out the smoke and just flying up. Add the toothpick on the top of the cone and paint it silver. The wings are now completely set hard and cooled down, so I'm attaching it to the side of the rocket. Just push the kebab skewers into the cake. Pull out blue fondant and cut out 3 different sizes of stars and apply some glue at the back and attach it right above the wings on both sides like this. We are almost finished. In the end, use the same silver paint to paint over the rocket wings and it's all done. I hope you like this video and I hope you find these steps easy to follow. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!